Hey guys, welcome back to Ripe Stories. In this video, a neighbor built 27 vacation cabins on my land, claiming that my grandpa gave permission before passing away, but he is lying and I actually inherited the property. Let's dive right into the video. And the title story starts like this. So, several years back I inherited a rural property from my grandparents. After very little convincing, I was able to get my wife to agree to let me keep the property. We had to basically build a new house on it and couldn't move there for a few years. She was in a hospital residency program and couldn't just stop in the middle, and we both knew it would be at least 3 or 4 years before we could make any real plans for the place. The property itself was something special: 40 acres of rolling pasture, a patch of old forest and a creek that cut right through the backlot. My grandpa has always said it was his piece from the world, and I understood why. Every time we visited, it felt like stepping into another time. You could still see where the old farmhouse foundation had been, and the old windmill that creaked in the wind like a heartbeat. The few times we did visit, everybody loved it there, especially the kids. They were young at the time and they ran into the shallow area of the creek, pointed out good trees that could become a treehouse one day, and just loved running around. The city didn't give them a lot of opportunity to have big green spaces to run and play, but things unfortunately got extremely busy. The kids were both in elementary school with activities almost every night, our jobs were taking a lot of our time, and my wife's residency hours were brutal. Before I knew it, I had gone nearly 3.5 years without visiting the property. Between my wife's residency, the kids' schedules and work, time just slipped away. It's not something I'm proud of, and I hope if my grandparents were looking down on me, they are not disappointed in me. One thing I need to mention is my neighbor from that rural area. He somehow is both very unfriendly, but a little too friendly at the same time too, if that makes any sense. He comes off as very cold, but seems to want to ask a million questions that are very personal. He comes off as very shady, and every conversation I've had with this man has given me a headache. Once he asked what kind of insurance I carried on the place, and then followed up with questions about whether my grandparents ever had business licenses. It was not casual conversation, he was fishing for something. At the time I brushed it off, figuring he was just nosy, but looking back, every question was part of him mapping out what he could get away with. With all of our conversations though, there's one I want to mention. At one point he mentioned extremely casually that I could build a bunch of homes on my property. I took it as some business advice that was unasked for but harmless. I had no idea that he was fixated on that idea and got busy those couple years I was gone. 3.5 years later, when I got back there, I found out that on my property a lot of big trees and open space were gone. Instead, I found 27 fully built vacation cabins. And they were occupied too. And yes, I counted them because I was just in so much shock. I didn't know what to think anymore. It didn't even feel real at first. Smoke curled up from a few chimneys, cars were parked neatly beside gravel paths, and kids were playing with beach balls near one of the decks. It was like stepping into a small vacation town, except it was all sitting on my land. My land that I hadn't touched in years. He had even run water and electrical lines to each one, connecting to a well system he had drilled and shared septic field he had installed near the back of the property. The infrastructure alone must have cost him a fortune. I just stood there, hands on my head, wondering if I had lost my mind or if someone had really built a village behind my back. I will admit that it took me too long to remember that neighbor suggested the homes years ago. I might not have remembered if it wasn't him that saw me and came over. Neighbor, looks good, right? Me, you did this? I never told you to build on my land. Neighbor, your grandpa said I could handle this. It was a joint thing between us before he died, you know. Me, that doesn't sound like him. Do you have any papers he signed? Neighbor, it was more of a verbal agreement. Either way, I had permission and you should be thanking me. I took all the risk and you get 5% for doing nothing. I didn't give a damn about the 5% he was just now offering me. I knew that it was way less than what it should have been anyway, since my property was worth a lot. He was being extremely shady and I was not happy about it. Also, the information he gave me about how much he was charging people was just wrong. I started taking pictures of everything, the cabins, the gravel roads, even the signs he had put up with his rental business name. Each one had his logo, phone number and website. It was all proof of what he had done. When I got home, I started organizing them in folders just in case this ever turned into something legal. I went online myself to see that his start date was way before he told me and that he was charging double what he told me. Even at 5% loss, he was doing anything he could to stop from giving me money. Money I didn't care about because I was too pissed from what he had actually done. By my rough calculations, he had pulled in hundreds of thousands of dollars over those years, and that was a conservative estimate based on his advertised rates and average occupancy I could piece together from reviews. He was getting rich off of stolen land. Neighbor also told me that he had gotten all of the permits legally. Now claiming that where he built the homes was not my land because my grandfather gifted it to him as part of that verbal agreement. I guess in death he was a very generous man. I'm shocked he didn't give neighbor everything. I started doing my own research on everything I could find related to what he was doing, looking up property records and trying to get copies of his permits through the state since he was refusing to show them to me. What I found was exactly what I expected. The permits listed him as the owner, which should have been caught immediately by the county since their records showed that I was the deed holder. It turns out the permitting office in that rural county was understaffed and still partially paper-based. He had submitted applications with a fake parcel number that didn't trigger automatic verification, and on others he had forged my grandfather's signature on permission letters. One of those documents even had a notary seal from someone who turned out to be his friend, and whose license had actually expired 2 years prior. I was angry, but I wasn't just in total rage. I was a little bit fascinated by what he had done and was curious to dig around to see how many laws he had actually broken. For such a confident and on the surface intelligent man, he was actually very ignorant and had an ego that he didn't know was going to get popped. I decided to consult a lawyer, not the type you see in billboards, but the one that actually knew about property law and rural land disputes. Better call Saul. I sent him everything I had and explained the situation from start to finish. He didn't even try to hide his disbelief. You're telling me this man built 24 cabins on your land without any written permission? I told him yes, and that the permits claimed he was the owner. One of the first things my lawyer asked about was insurance. It turned out the neighbor had taken out a commercial liability policy, but he had listed himself as the property owner on the application. That was yet another fraudulent document. When the insurance company found out the truth during our legal proceedings, they immediately cancelled his policy. Those guests had been staying in essentially uninsured cabins, which was another huge liability he had been exposing everyone to. The lawyer didn't even need to think long about the case itself. He said I had a solid case for trespass, fraud, and potentially theft by deception. The best part, according to him, was something I didn't even know existed: the doctrine of accession. And by the way, guys, if you enjoy stories about stupid, entitled people essentially speedrunning getting sent to prison, like the guy in this story, then please don't forget to like the video and post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support me. Thank you so much. So in our state, it basically meant that because he built permanent structures on my land without my permission or any legitimate legal right, those structures could become my property. The lawyer explained it was not automatic everywhere, and sometimes bad faith builders can remove their improvements, but given the fraud, the forgery, and the scale of what he had done, we had an exceptionally strong case that everything should stay and transfer to me as the rightful owner. In other words, everything he built was mine. Every lock, every roof, every cabin key. I nearly laughed when I heard that, but before I could start celebrating, I wanted to be sure. We verified through county records that the property line had not changed since my grandparents owned it. Every inch of those cabins was on my land, not an inch crossed into his. He had even bulldozed part of my family's old garden area. Looking back, I realized I should have noticed something was wrong from the property tax bills, but I had autopay set up through the estate account and the neighbor had somehow been intercepting or explaining away the county's reassessment notices. My lawyer later found out that he had been in contact with the county tax office claiming he was managing the property on my behalf. The bills had gone up, but not as dramatically as they should have, because he had been feeding the county lies about the structures being temporary or something. In essence, it was just another layer of his fraud that almost worked. My lawyer explained that this was actually not uncommon. People who successfully pull off the initial phases of a scam often get overconfident and they start believing their own story, getting sloppy with documentation because they've convinced themselves that they are in the right. He probably genuinely started believing that verbal agreement nonsense he was spouting, which is why he did not bother creating better fake paperwork. My lawyer drafted a cease and desist order while also filing an emergency injunction to prevent the neighbor from renting out another cabin or accepting new guests. The next day I drove back to the property with him and a county deputy. We posted the order on every cabin door. The guests were confused and understandably upset. However, my lawyer had anticipated this and advised me to honor their existing reservations through their checkout dates to avoid any liability. We posted notices explaining the ownership transfer and gave them a contact number for concerns. Most just wanted to finish their vacations in peace, but a few demanded refunds from the neighbor, which became his problem, not mine. The neighbor, on the other hand, was not polite about any of it. He came charging up in his truck, yelling that I was ruining his business. He tried to play the same card as before, that my grandfather had given him verbal rights to the land, but the deputy calmly reminded him that verbal agreements don't override recorded deeds. My lawyer handed him copies of the county property records, and that shut him up for a solid 30 seconds before he started threatening to sue me. The lawyer didn't flinch though. "Go ahead," he said. "You will just be suing the rightful owner." Things got even worse for him when the county clerk's office began reviewing the permits. It turned out he had listed a fake parcel number on one of the applications and another had my grandpa's name forged on the signature line. That made it an open fraud case. Once law enforcement got involved, it stopped being a civil issue and became a criminal one. He tried to spin a story about how it was all a misunderstanding, but when they pulled the notarization logs, it showed that the notary, who supposedly verified my grandfather's signature, was a friend of his, someone who didn't even hold a valid notary license anymore. At that point, his little empire was collapsing fast, and by dust settled, I mean many months of legal back and forth, 3 separate hearings, depositions, and more paperwork than I'd ever seen in my life. But finally, the judge's ruling came down, and by the time everything was resolved, the court's ruling was clear. The entire vacation rental business, including all 27 cabins and their contents, legally belonged to me as the rightful landowner. The judge even said that if the neighbor had spent money improving the property without my consent, that was his mistake, not mine. He was ordered to vacate the property, pay court costs, and cooperate with the turnover process. Watching him realize that everything he built now legally belonged to me was just surreal. He didn't even try to hide how defeated he felt. He just stood there while the court officer read the order out loud, shaking his head like it couldn't possibly be true. The news spread through the local grapevine faster than I expected. A few old-timers who had known my grandparents stopped by to congratulate me, saying my grandpa would have loved to see things set right. Even some of the guests who had rented the cabins reached out later saying they were glad the real owner had taken over. It was not about revenge anymore, it was about setting something straight that had gone wrong the day that man broke ground. Within a few months I had the cabins inspected, registered under my name, and listed properly. My wife, who by then had finished her residency and was working as an attending physician at a hospital 2 hours away, loved the idea of having a family cabin we could escape to on weekends. We decided to keep a few of them for private use and rent out the rest. Even at half capacity, they pulled in more money than I expected. What was once an act of arrogance and theft turned into a fully legitimate business that I ran the right way. The neighbor eventually moved out of the area. Last I heard, he was still fighting the county over his fraud charges and unpaid taxes from his business, but meanwhile, I put some of the rental profits towards maintaining the property, fixing up the creek area, planting new trees, and restoring what he had bulldozed. Girl could not understand why stealing was a fireable offense. This story I was told when I worked for a mid-range fashion store. A store was being refitted and the company was bringing in visual merchandisers as well as asking nearby staff to join in. As I was part-time, could do with the money and wanted to progress onto merchandising, so I volunteered. So this story was from the VMs who regularly work together for refits and setting up new stores. A few weeks before they had worked on fitting a new store while staff were being trained. One of the new workers had gone to their locker and found it open and money missing from their bag. They reported it and fortunately, the store already had cameras set up. And they caught who did it. They pulled the girl into the manager office and asked her if she took the money. I think it was around £20 and she bluntly says yes, she needed it and would pay it back when she got her first pay. Understandably, the manager said this was unacceptable and she would be escorted out. The girl said, Alright, and followed the boss to the exit. The next morning she was at the side door waiting to come in. They had changed the passcode as per protocol and she could not gain access. Apparently, she thought her only punishment was leaving work yesterday. And well guys, if the only punishment for stealing would be that you have to leave work early, then I guess more people would steal. Anyway, the boss had to explain that stealing was a sackable offense. Apparently she disagreed because she had promised to pay the money back. And yeah guys, I guess she was taking out a loan, in her eyes. The next one is titled, Lady Tries to Steal and Throws a Tantrum when Confronted, Making Things Worse and Ending Up in a Police Car. Also from r/Tales from Retail. And by the way, if you want to hear more stories of this subreddit and enjoy the stories I read, then please don't forget to like the video and post a comment because that would help me tremendously. I work as a cashier/shift manager in a grocery store. In our store, people need to bring produce to the register where we will weigh and price it for them or just scan the item when it is individually priced. One of these items is lettuce, which comes in opaque bags with an open top. A middle-aged lady, we will call her LL for lettuce lady, loads all of her groceries on the belt and I start to scan. When I reach for the lettuce, I feel something strange. It turns out lettuce lady had stacked 3 lettuces inside this bag. When I confronted her, she said she just grabbed the bag from the shelf. So I called in our produce clerk, PC, and the conversation went like this. Me too, produce clerk. This lady said she found a bag with 3 lettuces stuffed inside. Isn't that strange? PC, yes it is, as lettuces are only sold individually. LL starts to turn red. LL, classic incoming. I want to speak to your manager immediately. I proudly introduce myself as manager to LL, which made matters even worse because she just threw a tantrum a 3-year-old would be jealous of. The tantrum started with tearing off the bag with her teeth and throwing the lettuces to the floor, smashing them with her feet. I tell her to calm down, which only works as fuel on her already raging fire. She then starts to throw things from the belt into the store, and this was the point where I called in security and told PC to phone the police. This makes her even more angry, so when security arrives, she spits all over our security guard and my register. And then she tries to punch both me and the guard in the face. The guard eventually manages to tackle LL and keep her immobile until police arrived, and she then was arrested. When she was dragged out of the store, she started to scream things about our customer service all over the place. She ended up in the back of a police car because she was too cheap to pay the extra 75 cents for the lettuces, which were on sale anyways, and she was too stubborn and self-proud to admit her lame try to steal one of the cheapest items in our store like any sane adult would do. And yeah guys, imagine ending up in the back of a police car just because you tried to steal lettuce. That has to be the lowest of the lows that you can get to. Good riddance, Karen. The next one is the title story. It starts like this. So with all of the hype or lack of it, depending on who you're talking to, about the Switch 2, I wanted to come on here and tell you about my most recent Karen interaction. And by the way guys, this story was actually posted a couple of months ago, right when the Switch 2 released. And I would say OP was a little bit wrong about the hype thing because I think it's one of the best-selling consoles of all time already, or maybe it's even the best-selling one. Anyway, a bit of background to give you context. I own a small game shop in my town. We mostly sold TTRPGs and trading cards, but the past few years had the demand for video games go up, so we added some games and smaller systems for sale. It was not like we had a huge amount of them in the store, but they were larger ticket items that, if there was demand, made sure sales would be great. Since the store's on the smaller side, I'm very on top of inventory. Since I became owner, we only had one confirmed theft, which turned out to be someone not counting up the amount of Pokemon packs a customer had on hold. Thankfully, since it was a miscount on the cashier side, nothing needed to be done. Also, the game shop is right next to a pawn shop. This is important. With the Nintendo Switch 2 being announced, I decided to order a few for the store and have people sign up for a waitlist to receive the first batch. As soon as I advertised that I would have a waitlist for the Switch 2, I immediately had a bunch of people visit the store or call up to ask about being put on the waitlist. I kept it on a first-come first-served basis to keep things fair and planned to order more of the console if the waitlist got too long. I kept the list in several places around the shop so that the employees could find it once the Switches 2 came in, so they could contact the customers that were at the top of the list. I only had the people who wanted a Switch 2 on a list. I did not ask them for payment until they came to pick up the system. In order to verify that the person that came in to pick up the system was who they said they were, we provided them with an invoice receipt that came from our register. They needed to show that receipt to whoever was at the counter at the time, and they would get their console to pay for it. If they lost a receipt or did not have one at all when they came to pick up the console, then they would need to be placed at the bottom of the waitlist and be given a new receipt that they needed to present once they were called again. The way that other big brand stores were touting the Switch 2 had me paranoid that if I accepted payment from someone before they got their console and someone pretended to be them to pick it up, then I would be aiding a theft. The day of the arrival of the first batch of consoles arrived, and I spent the morning calling up the first 10 people on the waitlist to let them know they could come in to get their Switch 2. 5 people said they would pick it up later in the week, and I had to leave messages for 3 people, and 2 women said that they would pick it up that day. Well, that being done, I made sure that the rest of my employees knew who I had called and reminded them about the receipt rule: no receipt, no console. I was able to officially sell one of the consoles before a woman came up to the register. We are going to call her Karen. She gave the cashier a wide grin and started up a conversation which I summarized below. Karen, I'm here for the new Switchy thing. Cashier, yeah, we just got our first batch today. Can I confirm your name? Karen gives her name that is actually on the list, one of the people I left a message for. Cashier, alright, can you provide me the receipt? Karen, looking confused, why would I have a receipt? Cashier, ma'am, we provided everyone who was added to the waitlist with a special receipt to make sure. Karen, I never got a receipt. I don't know what you're talking about. Cashier, ma'am, everyone who was on the waitlist got a receipt. We have a record that you came in to pick it up about 3 months ago to confirm your spot on the list. Karen, I don't know what you're talking about. Me overhearing Karen starting to get a little loud. Is everything okay over here? Karen, this girl is not giving me my Switch, even though I am on the list. Me, do you have your receipt? Karen, I never got a receipt. I bought the damn thing already, but I don't have the special one that you all keep talking about. Me, firstly, the Switch 2 waitlist here did not have you buy the console. You got a receipt when you came in to request to be put on the waitlist. Did you lose it maybe? Karen, I told you I didn't get a receipt like that. Me, then you might have the wrong store. This has been the policy. We can definitely get you back on the waitlist for the 4th batch we'll be getting, but it's gonna be at least a few months. The door to the shop opened and another woman walked in. Karen turned around and immediately stormed out of the shop. The woman watched her go, confused, but then turned back to us. Woman, hey, I am, same name that Karen gave, and I got a message about the Switch 2 being in stock. I have my receipt for the waitlist as well. I was a bit taken aback that Karen had so blatantly lied in order to try and swindle a console, but with my safeguards she had been thwarted. I was able to give the actual waitlisted woman her console and thought that I would not see Karen again. The rest of that day was busy and we had another 3 people pick up their Switch 2s. I'd been helping around the store when one of my cashiers had to leave for a family emergency. I left one cashier at the front counter and then got on the other register about 20 minutes after. By the time the day was done, me and my employee were both tuckered out, having been the only 2 people working the store until closing. I did an inventory before I left for the day and double-checked the number of Switch 2s based off of the waitlist and the sales we made for the day. There were 5 in the system, so there should have been 5 behind the counter. Instead, there were 4. I double-checked and triple-checked, wondering if the cashier that left hadn't finished a transaction or something, but there was no record of a 6th Switch 2 being sold. I tried to remember if there was anyone who had gotten behind the counter during the busy day, but there had been so much going on that I couldn't place if there had been a time that me and my employee were both out on the floor so that someone could sneak behind the counter to grab the Switch 2. The store has security cameras, and checking them made me realize that Karen had found her way back into the store. She and 2 other customers had been behind the counter while my employee and I were out on the floor helping someone, but the angle of the cameras didn't pick up if any of them walked out with a console. I needed another pair of eyes and headed over to the pawn shop. They have cameras right outside of their store that face the sidewalk right outside the game shop store, so I figured the owner would be able to shed some light on the situation and have footage of someone definitely holding a Switch 2 that they didn't pay for. I then asked the owner if I could check his cameras from the afternoon and explained that I thought that someone stole a Switch 2. The owner told me he did not need to check the cameras since he figured that the woman who came into his shop earlier in the day was sketchy. He told me that she tried to pawn an unopened Switch 2 and he told her that he needed her to come back the next day in order for him to assess it, since he wanted to get confirmation from me that I actually sold it to her. The owner showed me the tapes from inside the store, and who showed up with an unopened console box but Karen. I told the owner that he should call me once Karen came in with the console the next day and I would confront her. I just wanted to get the Switch 2 back so that the person on the waitlist who had gone through all the trouble to request it would get it. I really didn't want the police involved and hoped that Karen might listen to reason if I explained. Well, the next day I got a call first thing that Karen was at the pawn shop. I confronted her in the pawn shop and told her to give me the console back. She refused, claiming it was hers and that she paid for it. I told her that she couldn't have it since she wasn't on the waitlist and there was no record of another Switch being sold. She called me a liar and the pawn shop owner was already calling the police. Once the officers arrived, one stayed in the pawn shop with Karen to hear her story, while I brought the other officer to my shop to show them my inventory logs, the waitlist, the sales receipts from the day before. Since I was meticulous with my inventory, I was able to provide the serial number of the console that she stole. The officer told me to wait in my store while he checked the serial number against the device Karen had. About 5 minutes passed before I heard shouting from outside. I went out to see Karen being led to the police cruiser in handcuffs, screaming about how it is just a stupid toy and that she cannot go to jail over a toy. The officer told me that they'd be in touch to get a full statement from me. So yeah, Karen got arrested for theft and I pressed charges against her. The owner of the pawn shop was able to press charges against her too, since she would have given him a stolen item that he would have been arrested for having. Karen's day in court a few months later brought a few surprises. Apparently, it was not the first time she had stolen something. She had been charged a few years ago for theft as well, but got a lighter sentence because it was her first offense. Since the Switch 2 was over $150 per the laws in my state, her charges of theft had more consequences attached. Karen then ended up being fined and serving some time behind bars and was required to pay me and the pawn shop owner a restitution fee for the trouble she caused. If you ask me, even though she thought she could not go to jail for just stealing a toy, she got exactly what she deserved. And the next one is another funny story from r/Tales from Retail. It is titled, "Ma'am, that is not your baby." So I last worked in retail about a year ago in a local store chain, and this one encounter always stood out in my memories. I first saw this woman enter the store with a baby stroller. She seemed pretty normal. About 20 minutes later, as I was manning the cashier, she turned up in line. She seemed a bit nervous. I greeted her a good morning, but she just responded with a nod. As I finished bagging her things and said goodbye, she promptly bumped into the woman beside her, and all of us could hear glass bottles hitting each other from inside the stroller. We tried to talk to her into letting us look at her baby, but she refused, saying her baby is asleep. We inquired about the glass sound, but she began screaming that it is just her baby's milk bottle. My manager finally came to us when a small crowd was forming around us as she began shouting, "Stay away from me, guys! You're stressing my baby the F out! Who do you think you are?" I of course promptly called security as she started pushing our other customers out of the way as she ran to the exit. Luckily, they caught her before she got away. It turns out that she tried to steal 4 bottles of vodka and hid them in the baby's stroller, trying to pass them off as her baby. And the next one is an Am I the A-hole story titled, "Am I the A-hole for uninviting my adoptive brothers from my wedding after they said they don't see me as family?" And if you've watched until here, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much. So I'm a 32-year-old man and I'm getting married to my longtime girlfriend soon. What should be one of the happiest moments of my life has turned into a heartbreaking ordeal because of a deepening rift in my family. So to give you some background, I am my parents' biological son, and when I was 12 they adopted 2 boys who were biological siblings. These were Jack, who was 8, and Liam, who was 5. From the very beginning it was clear that things were gonna be tough. Jack came with severe behavioral issues due to some intense trauma. I'll spare the details, but it was really significant and I tried my hardest to be understanding, but living with him was nothing short of exhausting. His outbursts were constant and I often felt like I was walking on eggshells, terrified of setting him off. As we grew older, I continued to try to be there for Jack despite everything. A few years ago, Jack fell into a devastating drug addiction. I stood by him through his darkest moments, supporting him through rehab and doing everything I could to help him get back on his feet. It was draining and heartbreaking, but I did it because I loved him and believed that despite our challenges, we were still brothers. The situation came to a head recently at a Sunday dinner at my parents' house. My son was working on his summer homework, which involved creating a family tree. He innocently asked Jack if he wanted to be included, and Jack just flat out said no. He didn't want to be a part of it because, in his exact words, "We're not real brothers." He said it so casually, like it was the most obvious thing in the world, with no regard for how much it would cut me to the core. I was utterly stunned, but what shattered me even more was that Liam, who I've always felt closer to, just sat there in silence and he did not say a word. He did not defend me or even acknowledge how hurtful Jack's words were, he just let it happen. I've tried so hard to be supportive of both of them, especially Jack despite the endless challenges, so for Jack to say that and for Liam to do nothing, it felt like a gut punch. It was as if they were both telling me that I was never really truly part of their family. I decided to uninvite both Jack and Liam from my wedding. My fiancé has been nothing but supportive of my decision, but my parents are furious. They've made it clear that if Jack and Liam are not invited, they won't attend either. It feels like history is repeating itself, with my parents once again prioritizing Jack over me, no matter how much it hurts me. I'm absolutely heartbroken that my parents would choose to miss my wedding rather than support me in this. I know Jack has been through a lot, but I've done everything I can to be there for him and for Liam despite all the heartache. And now I feel like I'm the one being punished for finally standing up for myself and setting some boundaries. So, Reddit, am I the a-hole for uninviting my brothers after they said they don't see me as family, even if it means my parents won't come to my wedding? And here, Ripe Stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this story. Do you think OP is the a-hole here or not? Some people in the comments said, why was your kid even asking him in the first place? That could have hurt them too. As a child, it would have never occurred to me not to include my aunts and uncles in a family tree. What did you say in front of your child to plant the idea that he needed to ask them? And did you correct your kid and say that of course his uncles should be on the family tree? You are also to blame in how this rift started, because whether intentional or not, you also did not correct the idea that you are not real brothers/family and it was your child that asked the question. Usually people feel uncomfortable correcting other people's children in awkward situations like this. It falls on the parents to talk to their child and get to the root of things. And then OP answered, well, because he is 5 and just wanted to show off what he was doing, I've never said anything to plant an idea that they are not my brothers. He does not even know that they're adopted. Not because it's something that we hide, it just hasn't ever been something we really discuss as a family. Also, add uncles and aunties to the family tree was an optional extension, and he said it in a way of, come and help me add you in if you wanna be, not you don't deserve to be in the tree. You're honestly clasping at straws here. I have no issue with someone labeling me as the a-hole, but don't just make up context to decide it. OP also said, I don't blame them or him for his drug addiction. Jack and Liam had truly horrible things happen to both of them as children. That is stuff I won't get into here, but you can understand it was the type of stuff that leaves lifelong scars on you, even with the buttload of therapy they've gone through. One time Jack spoke to me about how when he's high on drugs, it is the only time in his entire life where he does not constantly remember and the only time he ever feels at peace. Obviously, I should not be the one who is constantly picking up the pieces of him, but I can 100% understand why he got into drugs. However, he is still an a-hole though. And then OP further said, the family tree and Jack's comment was the only catalyst for the argument that happened, and yes, there would have been no issues with Jack being included in the family tree. Update to the story, buckle up because things have taken a wild turn. After hearing from so many of you, I decided I needed to talk to Liam. We met at a pub and I just laid it all out there, how hurt I was when he didn't say anything after Jack made that awful comment about not being real brothers. I was half expecting him to defend himself, but what I got was something entirely different. Liam confessed that he's been living in fear of Jack for years. He told me he kept quiet that night because he was terrified of setting Jack off, not because he agreed with him, and then he dropped the bombshell. Despite being Jack's biological brother, he has felt just as much of an outsider in our family as I have. The constant pressure from our parents to cater to Jack's every whim has worn him down too. Liam assured me that he has always seen me as his brother and that he regrets not standing up for me sooner. Hearing that was a huge relief, honestly. He is completely on my side now, and we agreed that if Jack cannot respect me as a brother, he has no place at my wedding. Or in our lives. But just when I thought things could not get any more intense, my parents decided to make everything worse. I sat them down and explained why I uninvited Jack, hoping they'd understand. Instead, they threw down an ultimatum. If Jack is not invited, they are not coming to my wedding. No room for discussion, no empathy, just flat out refusal. I was gutted. After all these years of putting Jack's needs above mine, this is how they repay me. I could not hold back anymore. I let out all the anger and frustration I've been bottling up for years. I told them how I've always been the one sacrificing, how they've always prioritized Jack, and that I was done being treated like I don't matter. I made it clear that if they choose not to come to my wedding, they are making their choice and I will make mine. With that, I walked out, leaving them to stew in their own decisions. Out of nowhere though, Jack started bombarding me with the nastiest, most hurtful texts I've ever received. He accused me of turning Liam against him, of ripping the family apart, and had the audacity to call me selfish for abandoning him. He ranted about how he never felt like he belonged in the family and how it is all my fault for pushing him away. His words hit hard, but they also opened my eyes. Jack has spent his whole life blaming everyone else for his problems, and I've been his favorite scapegoat. This time though, I am not letting him guilt trip me. I did not even respond, I just blocked his number. If he cannot see what he's done wrong, then there's nothing more to say. Liam was livid when I told him about Jack's message. He's more determined than ever to support me, and we've decided to go low contact with our parents until after the wedding. Liam's been a rock through all of this, helping me with the wedding plans and making sure I'm not dealing with this mess alone. So, the wedding is still happening, but with a much smaller guest list. My parents have not reached out since our argument, and at this point I don't care if they show up or not. This day is about me and my fiancé, and I'm not letting anyone, not even my own family, ruin it. And the last one is another story from r/Tales from Retail to end the video, and it is titled I Know the Owner Too. So this was many years ago when I was still in the trenches. Like any retail store, we regularly got the I know the owner claims. However, we're a small company and everybody knows everybody, and the owner had a very open door policy for employees. I had one guy who wanted a steep discount on a barbecue, to the point that we'd be losing money. Margins are pretty low on barbecues because Jeff said to. Okay, that sounds like something Jeff would do. Let me call him and verify it. While dialing the phone, I think he actually did know the owner from the way he ran out of the door, because the most likely response to that lie would have been to be banned from all our stores permanently. And yeah guys, thank you for watching. If you ever worked in retail, let me know about your stories in the comments, and I will see you again tomorrow.